Hello, and welcome to today's Global Fleet Champions webinar, Prioritising the Mental Health of Drivers. Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Break, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. To learn more about the campaign and what we do, please visit globalfleetchampions.org. All vehicles should be checked regularly to ensure they meet the standards required for safe and efficient operation. In much the same way, the mental welfare of drivers should also be assessed before they are allowed behind the wheel. In today's webinar, we will discuss the causes and symptoms of mental health conditions and the impact they can have on driver behaviour, how to address the stigma of mental illness, how to identify potential mental health issues in your workforce, and how to develop a culture that puts people first and values their welfare. On your screen now, you should be able to see a multiple choice question poll so we can find out your views on today's topic. It is anonymous, simply select one answer and press confirm, and we will discuss the results at the beginning of the Q&A session, which is your opportunity to ask some of today's presenters a question. You can put forward your questions at any time during the webinar by using the chat box on the webinar panel. Thank you for your time, and the webinar will now begin.
Hello everyone, my name's Andy Price. I'm a Director at Fleet Safety Management. First of all, many thanks to Break for asking me to share my thoughts on this important topic. Mental well-being might not look like a fleet safety issue, but clearly someone who is suffering faces an increased risk of being involved in a collision. So it's something that should be included in any effective work-related road risk management program. Today we're going to cover the agenda that you can see now. So we'll start off looking at how you can spot the signs and what some of those signs are. We'll look at the role that everybody in the organisation has, but hear about perhaps the most important role of that of the line manager. Understand the importance of creating the right culture in the company and the right support network for people. And finally, we'll see where this fits into the wider risk management process. As like with any fleet safety topic, it's important not to look at any one thing in isolation because there are a lot of things interconnect. So how do you spot the signs? Well, it's all about observation, really, simple observation. I'm going to go through some of the issues that we might see in our colleagues, in our reports. The size in the graphic there doesn't bear any relation to the importance. That's just how the word art was formed. So we've got lack of focus, as you can see, increased errors, missing deadlines or forgetting tasks, loss of confidence in the person, an inability to concentrate, erratic or socially unacceptable behaviour. They could be irritable, aggressive, tearful, lack of care over their appearance, taking on too much work and volunteering for every project. And that's an interesting one because all too often we look at potential negative changes in somebody's behaviour, but actually the opposite could be true. They could be taking on too much work. They could have decreased performance, they could be generally run down, long working hours, and another example of something that might on the face of it not seem like a mental health issue. Emailing out of hours or when they're on holiday, they're having difficulty sleeping or they're constantly tired, suffering from frequent minor illnesses or headaches, upset stomachs, perhaps sudden weight gain or weight loss, becoming withdrawn, not participating in conversations or social activities compared to what they normally do, increased arguments or conflicts with colleagues, increased consumption of alcohol, caffeine, cigarettes, medication, loss of their sense of humour, or the opposite, being louder or more exuberant, indecision, procrastination, fixating on grievances, fair treatment, things like that, becoming apathetic, having difficulty remembering things, increased sickness absence, reduced punctuality, differences in trends from their telemetry data, or their exceptions from that data, negative feedback from colleagues or negative feedback from third parties. So there's a lot of things that may have changed, and it's all about comparing what their behaviour is normally to what it is currently. Now, a lot of these things may have other root causes, but what they are potentially red flags that may indicate that there's something wrong. So always ask the question, what's changed? And now obviously we've gone through a long list there, and there's not an exhaustive list, but always look for changes in behaviour. Because we need to understand what's caused that change and be able to provide the appropriate support if necessary. Now, everyone has a role to play in this, in identifying potential mental health problems. So at the top left, that's indicating the line manager. Now we're going to come back to that person because they play a critical part in this in any organisation. The middle graphic, that represents people's colleagues, because in many cases, depending on the circumstances and the job role, the colleagues may see the person much more often, much more frequently than the line manager. So when we're talking in a fleet environment, the guy may be a salesperson. They may drive directly from work to their first job. So they may not see people very often. And when they do see people, it might be their colleagues rather than line manager. So they've got colleagues have a big role to play in noticing whether anything has changed and asking the person if they're okay. And finally, the bottom right on the slide, it represents the fleet manager, because they can also play their part. And this may seem a little bit unusual, but fleet managers are looking at fleet data generally. But if there's changes in trends, exceptions coming from the fleet data, now this could be from maintenance records, telemetry data, if there's significant changes from what they would normally expect from that person, that can indicate that there might be a problem. So the fleet or transport manager has a role to play too. But we'll just go back to the role of the line manager. The line manager is the controlling mind of the employee, and they'll be monitoring them relatively closely. So they're ideally placed to identify any changes in behaviour, whether this is through their personal contact with the employee or through observations and changes to their performance. Now, it can be easy for a line manager to ignore certain trends. We mentioned before that if an employee is taking on more workload or volunteering for more projects, that on the face of it might seem a good thing. But it actually could be an indication of a possible change to the employee's mental health, rather than the manager assuming that they're just becoming a better and more valuable employee. So they've clearly got a role to play, and should be trained to on how to engage with their employees. The main summary is whoever is noticing changes in an employee, the most important thing is to ask the question, are you okay? So just a simple question can make such a big difference. You need to create the right culture and support network within your organization where nobody's afraid to speak up. So if someone's struggling, that they're not afraid to actually seek help, or engage with one of their colleagues or their manager. And you need that culture which encourages people to do that rather than to keep silent. As I said before, line managers should be trained on how to engage with their team about mental health issues, and the right support networks such as confidential helplines, things like that should be set up. Everybody should be made aware of the importance of good mental health and what the signs are that somebody might be struggling. As I said before, everybody has a role to play, even if it's just asking a simple question to a colleague, are you okay? Now you'll hear more about what companies can do in a subsequent case study. So how does this fit into the risk management process? As I mentioned before, with any fleet topic, it's important never to look at things in isolation because they're all interconnected. So this is what an effective work-related road risk management process looks like, based on proven health and safety principles. Now, in the plan phase, which is a starting point of any risk management process, now clearly mental well-being and mental health should feature in your safe driving policies and procedures. And we've already heard about the importance of line manager training. In the check phase, then this is where we might see evidence of things changing. Now, this might be from fleet data, including telemetry trends, and valuable insights can be learned from post-incident debriefs. So hopefully you're doing those, looking to understand the underlying root causes of why collisions are occurring. In the act phase, then clearly the development of a good on-road safety culture should also, on a wider organisational basis, include the right supportive culture that removes any stigma associated with mental health and encourages people to speak up and also to seek support. So why is this important? I thought I'd share my own personal experience of this issue. A close industry contact of mine was taking on a lot of project work. All of this was important work. He was keen to do it. He was the right person for the job. Everyone else identified that he was the right person for the job. He was also traveling a lot more than usual. On one occasion, I was with him at a conference in Asia. He flew back on the Thursday, only to fly out to the United States the following weekend. Not long after that, we were having dinner one evening before another conference that we were both speaking at in Paris. And I noticed that he was having a lot more to drink than usual. He had his usual one beer, then he had another, then he had another, then he started sharing our red wine. And he was great company that night. But things had changed. With all these changes in such a short time, I wish I'd have asked him if he was okay. As a few weeks later, he'd taken his own life. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why we should all take this issue seriously and make sure that our organisations are doing something to identify and support employees suffering from mental health problems. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm Rebecca Posner here from TRL, and I'm going to be talking about the business case for mental health. So I always like to start with a statistic, and it is 1 in 6. So what does that mean? Well, 1 in 6 adults over the age of 16 in England have experienced symptoms of common mental health disorders in any given week. And that is likely to be an underestimation because of biases in reporting, and these only include common mental health disorders. Mental health has been defined in many ways, but these definitions on the screen at the moment highlight the complexity of mental health, whereby being mentally healthy isn't just the absence of a mental health diagnosis or difficulties, but an individual's ability to realize their own potential, to learn, express and manage a range of emotions, form and maintain good relationships, cope and manage change and uncertainty. In order to understand the need for workplaces to look after the mental health of their employees, and particularly drivers, the first thing to understand is the size of the issue. Mental health, the difficulties that those living with poor mental health can face, and the importance of taking care of both one's mental health as well as those towards which we have a duty of care, has received increased attention in recent years, but this is still few and far between. My focus for today is going to be to discuss the importance of taking into consideration your driver's mental health and the impact that not looking after the mental health of your employees can have on your organisation and their well-being more widely. According to the latest Labour Force survey, there were 28.2 million days lost in 2018 and 2019 due to ill health and non-fatal workplace injuries. Stress, depression or anxiety accounts for the largest numbers of days lost, with 12.8 million self-reported days lost due to poor mental health. When averaging that out, each person takes about 21.2 days off work as a result of stress, depression or anxiety. Now, this is of course an average across the entire UK workforce, but does provide us with an indication of the sheer scale of the issue we are tackling. What is more worrying is that these figures are self-reported, and therefore are likely to be an underestimation due to the many biases and the stigma still attached to mental health, especially male mental health. These figures also account for just 3 types of mental health difficulties. There are more than 10 overarching mental health categories and more than 30 different types of mental health difficulties experienced in the UK. Along with a recent HSE report, 2 additional reports commissioned or conducted with Mind, the mental health charity, in 2017 and 2018, aiming to investigate the impact of mental health in the workplace, identified some alarming statistics. Some of these from both reports include 61% of employees having experienced mental health issues due to work or where work was a related factor, 16% of employees, only 16% of employees, should I say, felt able to disclose a mental health issue to their managers, and 30% of work-related illnesses within the transport and logistics sector were due to stress, anxiety, and depression. Absenteeism in the UK due to mental health costs UK businesses about 8 billion per year. Presenteeism costs UK businesses between 17 and 26 billion per year. And staff turnover due to mental health difficulties cost 8 billion each year. In order for us to start addressing poor mental health in the workplace, we need to understand what is leading to people developing poor mental health. So what is it that leads to poor mental health at work? Well, based on the academic literature, it is evident that the working environment within the transport industry has a strong impact on mental health and well-being of professional drivers. As the published research show and our engagement with the industry in the UK confirms, drivers describe their working environment as highly competitive, with increased company scrutiny for increased technology, long working hours with pressure of just-in-time deliveries and irregular shift work, high demands for continuous mental alertness in a monotonous job, and poor work-life balance, which leads to chronic social isolation. HSE's recent report further supports this, listing 7 key factors that impact mental health, with the most reported being workload, which includes tight deadlines, too much work, pressure or responsibility. This factor is reported 3 times as often as any other factor. Others include lack of support from management, changes at work, violence, threats or bullying, role uncertainty, such as lack of clarity about the job or uncertain what meant to do, and lacking control, so no say over what or how to do a job. But what does all of that mean on mental health? Well, as well as leading to higher prevalence rates of poor mental health, it also leads to increased prevalence rate of sleep problems and chronic fatigue, higher levels of social dysfunction and loneliness. But more worrying in the transport industry, particularly with freight drivers, fewer are seeking professional support to manage their mental health. While many organisations have become aware of the impact of poor mental health on overall health, what isn't as known is the impact that poor mental health can have on driver behaviour directly. If we take the example of stress, as we mentioned, those who drive for work are more likely to experience stress, in part due to their working environment, and they're less likely to seek support. Now, I'm sure that for most of you listening today, your top priority is safety, ensuring that drivers get from A to B as safely and securely. Firstly, stress is dynamic, which means that things from different sources interact with each other. For example, stress can be transferred from one environment to the other. What that means is that increased work-related stress as a result of increased demand on drivers, for example, can be combined with stress occurring in someone's personal life. So if someone is experiencing stress at home, that stress doesn't disappear when they arrive at work or get into their vehicle, but instead that gets transferred or added to the stress they're experiencing at work, to the driving environment and the driving task. And what that means in terms of road safety is increased self-reported crash involvement, increased cognitive lapses, increased driving errors, and increased traffic violations. And that's just the impact of stress. There's a growing body of evidence linking poor mental health more widely, such as the conditions shown on the screen, to risky and dangerous driving behaviour. That can lead to increased likelihood of committing lapses in driving, increased traffic violations and driving errors, and ultimately increased self-reported crash involvement. Now, all employers have a duty of care towards their employees, and not looking after employees can have a number of significant impacts on your organisation itself. Collisions and incidents are just the top of the iceberg. Poor mental health can lead not only to poor customer service, increased fuel consumption, metal costs, higher insurance claims, and poor company reputation, but more importantly, putting the lives of your drivers at risk. A company always strives to be the most efficient, profitable, and achieve high customer service. But if the operational practices of your organization are leading to increased prevalence of poor mental health, which can translate to higher absenteeism, higher presenteeism, higher staff turnover, poor staff morale, increased likelihood of being involved in a collision, and damaging a company's reputation, are the current practices really the most effective? Or do they in fact need to be amended to reduce the negative impact on driver mental health? So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Hi, my name's Adam Heintzen. I'm the Director of Compliance for Acumen Waste Services. And I'm going to talk to you today about stopping the stigma around mental health. And this is primarily based around drivers. So in broad, as it says on the slide, people who experience mental health issues often report facing stigma and discrimination in the workplace, which can often make problems worse. And primarily, what I'm going to do today is talk about these two subjects broadly, which is introducing measures that can break down the stigma attached to mental illness and try and encourage drivers to talk with each other. Now, my experience largely is based on about 30 years of managing people, and predominantly I had a full career in the British military, involved in rotary aviation, and my experiences dealing with mental health issues stem largely from managing soldiers, and in particular on return from operations, whether it be in Afghanistan or Iraq. But three examples spring to mind which demonstrates how people react differently to events. And one of those reactions from one of the soldiers was to open up and make me aware of how he was struggling with mental health issues, and that he was concerned over the impact on his ability to function at work. The contrast was one of my soldiers going absent without leave. He left his wife and his child for a week with no warning to any of his friends or colleagues, and there was no previous signs before that had happened. Lastly, a senior non-commissioned officer had a conversation with me about the impact of planning military training exercises and how tired and stressed that he would become from comparing the training to real events that he had experienced on operations. Now, it's really positive to me that two of the three felt able to talk, which was good, but the fact that one of my soldiers didn't feel able to communicate his problems is something that had to be resolved. To ensure that any stigma attached to that could have prevented that discussion taking place was addressed would take strong leadership. And key to that would be to introduce a series of measures that enable people to talk without obstruction and a change any cultural issues. So what's the context of this presentation? I'll just put these up for you to see. Now, trying to communicate to drivers, any other remote workers is always a challenge, not only in reference to mental health awareness, but also the host of company policies, aims, and objectives. The introduction of IT platforms, for example, for scheduling jobs and sending paperwork necessary for drivers' tasks has been revolutionary, but doesn't replace personal contact. Now, creating the opportunities for discussion is fundamental, as is ensuring that the culture, as I previously mentioned, of the organisation is one that encourages drivers to come forward. The importance of promoting a workplace that continually reviews how it manages workplace stress and mental health awareness is made even more clear when considering the accessibility of professional help. And I put that on the screen that the NHS average waiting time to see a clinical psychologist is 4.5 years. Now, even more alarming, as per the last bullet point, is that 1 in 6 of your staff in the UK will experience some form of psychological illness whilst in work. So not addressing the stigma attached to reporting such cases can have very harmful effects. And what are those effects? What do they look like? So the harmful effects of having stigma attached to mental health are vast. Stigma in the form of social distancing has been observed when people are unwilling to associate with a person with mental illness. This type of discrimination has a huge impact on self-esteem and confidence, which in turn can increase isolation from society and reinforce feelings of exclusion and social withdrawal. Now, the Alliance for Mental Health observed that people with mental health problems are frequently the object of ridicule and are depicted within the media of being sometimes violent, impulsive, and incompetent. Now, in light of this, the Department of Health funded a program called SHIFT. The Department of Health found that many people with mental health problems say that the biggest barrier to getting back on their feet is not the symptoms of illness, but the attitudes of other people. Now, evidence suggests people with mental illness are at greater risk from physical health issues as well as psychological health issues, including things such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, and respiratory disease. They also have a higher risk of premature death. Lastly, a barrier to seeking treatment can cause relapse and even hinder any potential recovery. So there's simple things and certain steps that we can practically do and implement. And they are as follows. Talk openly about mental health. Educate yourself and others and employ a mental health first aider, for example. Be aware of your language and others. And also encourage equality between physical and mental illness. No matter how you contribute to mental health, the mental health movement, you can make a difference simply by knowing that mental illness is not anyone's fault. No matter what people say, you can make a difference by being and living stigma-free. So what do the practical measures look like, and what are some of the things that Acumen, who I work for, and I have introduced? So, practical measures. Organising team events for drivers regularly. So we arrange at Acumen a 3-day company workshop annually. In that, we introduce key parts of the company induction. We address health and safety issues that may have arisen from the review of the previous year. And we create the opportunity for drivers to create relationships with one another. So it gives them a platform to talk to their peers. You can make financial advice available free to members of staff outside of their driving hours. And one of these initiatives was to work with someone called Able Futures. Now, this is a free Department for Work and Pensions initiative. We partnered with Able Futures to ensure drivers have someone to talk to if experiencing any issues, such as anxiety, depression, grief, or stress, or are struggling to deal with problems such as debt, disrupted sleep, or relationship breakdowns that may be affecting their mental health. Now, Able Futures could give up to 9 months access to mental health professionals who will help to make a plan for how individuals can help with their mental health, feel better, and have more good days. That support is available over the phone, through email, and face-to-face meetings at a time and a place to suit the individual. There's no cost to use this service, and there's no waiting list. It's a completely confidential service, which is even better. And Able Futures will not inform the employer, the driver's colleagues, family or friends that the drivers have accessed their service, or the drivers that have accessed their service. So what other practical measures can be in place? Things that you ought to consider. Now, this is quite key in creating a relationship with the driver's family. Now, either through social occasions or just good line management, where a relationship can be forged with the family members, and may feel able to relay their concerns, and the family members will see potential well-being issues arising, possibly before they even see it themselves. And also training of those responsible for the drivers, so managers. It's important to train managers and those with responsibility for routing and scheduling types of jobs. If they are alive to the impact their decisions may have on drivers' mental health, then they can ease situations, alert senior managers for potential problems, liaise with the family members, as we've spoken about, and offer sound advice. They really are the eyes and ears and make or break the company's culture and strong leadership initiatives. Remembering also their mental health, the manager's mental health and their needs, and the potential that a different strategy is needed for them. Now, how we package these initiatives and make them accessible, i.e. how we communicate them, is also important. And these are some of the things that we've started to introduce within Acumen. So how do we encourage people to talk? Use of social media, we've mentioned previously, in Twitter posts, a company handbook or safety rules and engagements, but including their well-being initiatives. The ability to report any such issues. So not only health and safety issues, but things that they may be concerned with from a mental health perspective, or reading into those safety issues, how they could impact on someone's personal well-being. Use of telematics can also be helpful to managers to look at any change in driving behaviour, and if for any reason there may be some impact on that caused by mental health issues. Stress surveys are also key, as well as campaigns such as the Able Futures that I've already mentioned. So that wraps up some of the or all the topics that I've been asked to talk about today, and breaking it down, you know, we've discussed about introducing measures and what the practicalities of those measures are, i.e. encouraging the drivers to talk. And hopefully you've got something to take away from that. But what I'll say finally with these references that I've put on the screen for you is if they don't come to you, i.e. your drivers come to you, then you have to go to them. Now, audits can create that platform. So I would encourage people to chat frequently with your drivers. This may mean a program for senior managers to contribute, for example. Also, consider mental health as much and as equal to the importance of physical health. There are several challenges to breaking down the barriers that create the stigma around mental health issues. Yet there are more and more positive examples of men especially speaking out and leading the way and communicating the message. So if I have one final message for you, is this is absolutely all about leadership, strong leadership, and putting in place those measures to hopefully ensure people have a better day. Thank you, and I'd welcome any questions.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Hill. I'm the lead occupational health and wellbeing partner for Anglian Water, and I will briefly discuss how we prioritise our drivers' welfare with a focus on mental health. So Anglian Water is the largest water company in terms of geographical region in England. We supply over 1 billion litres of water every day, and if you were to lay our pipes end to end, they'd reach all the way to Australia and back. Anglian Water serves the fastest growing parts of the UK in terms of housing, with a predicted 34% growth in number of households by 2031. We have 5,000 employees, 70% of them are male, 30% of them are female, and we have a diverse workforce in terms of the range of different jobs, from meter readers to office workers and even a priest. When it comes to our drivers, we have 1,600 employees who drive commercial vans and over 100 HGV drivers. In addition to this, 600 employees have company cars, and most other employees will own their own vehicle. Water is important to us, and we look after it with care. However, we strongly believe we cannot do this unless we look after our employees. To look after our employees at Anglian Water, we've analysed sickness absence trends over the last 3 years. We've identified certain hotspots in regards to employees' job role and location, and this way we ensure that any planned intervention is targeted and appropriate. Looking at a snapshot of sickness absence stats, we can see that poor mental health is on the rise. Historically, musculoskeletal disorders and mental health conditions were always seen on par. However, over the last few years, the national statistics for poor mental health in the workplace has shot up. Some may even describe it as an epidemic, and therefore it's really important we understand the causation of rise in poor mental health. We've done this at Anglian Water through various channels, including having data from our EAP and private healthcare. We've had focus groups and company surveys, including Britain's Healthiest Workplace, and we now better understand the causes of poor mental health and how to prevent it. At Anglian Water, we partner with business in the community and developed our strategy based around their work well model. This is a holistic approach which looks at wellbeing as having 4 main areas, which include mental wellbeing, physical wellbeing, social wellbeing, and financial wellbeing. We also have a strong brand in Anglian Water, which is our life brand. We aim to ensure that every employee is happier, healthier, and safer in work. When we talk about somebody's financial, social, or mental well-being, we refer to an employee having a happier life. When it comes to their physical health, we refer to somebody's healthier life. And if someone is happier and healthier, then ultimately it will lead to a safer life. Having a strong brand, which includes positive framing of health, allows employees to feel engaged with the concepts of life. The outcome of all of this is a wellbeing plan. We have a yearly plan which concentrates on improving good mental health from October to March, as we have higher rates of sickness absence during this period, and then we concentrate on good physical health from April to August. This is not to say we solely focus on this, as we cannot separate the mind and the body, but all of our messaging has a holistic approach involving the life concepts. We also align with national campaigns, such as Time to Talk in February and Men's Health Week in June. These campaigns are chosen to support our strategy and gives employees a clear direction of the company's focus. This is a company-wide strategy, and we acknowledge when it comes to health, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. Therefore, we do encourage employees to lead their own campaigns and have additional tailored campaigns for different pockets of the business. We have a great variety of wellbeing tools and resources at Anglian Water, but sadly, due to the large geographical area, lone working, and limited platforms of communication, not everyone is always aware of what is available to them. Over the last few years, we've worked hard to engage our staff and drivers to increase the awareness and let them know what's available support for them. Having a foundation of good awareness of these tools is a good first step. However, we are now working on the importance of leadership, whether that's self-leadership, where employees feel empowered to seek support for themselves, or through support of wellbeing champions, line managers, senior directors, to encourage employees to proactively access the support available to them. This will further help the continued change in culture to create positive wellbeing that ensures our staff are happier, healthier, and safer. Our mental health campaign this year has three main elements. The first is all about ending the stigma around mental health. We've done this through creating videos in which employees share their own stories of their mental health journey and what supports has been helpful. Having colleagues talk about their own experience has been really powerful in encouraging others to open up around their own mental health. We also hold tea and talk sessions. This is some allotted time where employees can have a focused conversation around mental health. The second element of the campaign was to promote the resources available to Anglian Water employees. We have a range of proactive tools used to help to improve somebody's mental health. We ask our employees to think about their mental health the same way they would think about their physical health or dental health. Some employees may go to the gym for their physical health or brush their teeth for their dental health. But what do they do for their mental health? We encourage employees to complete mindfulness exercises through a Be Mindful app. Just a few minutes a day of mindfulness can really help someone improve their mental resilience. Another simple proactive tool is the use of WAPs. These are wellness action plans. This is a structured template conversation that line managers and employees can have around mental health. At the end of the process, the employee feels that they've been listened to and acknowledged, and the line manager has a plan and understands their employee. Support for those with poor mental health or mental health conditions comes from our private healthcare, where employees can now access self-referral for mental health support. Employees can see a broad range of mental health professionals, including CBT therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, with no GP letter required. Since the introduction of this service, we've seen the number of referrals increase by 100%. We also have an employee assistance program and access to financial support from a company called Neighbour. They offer competitive loans that also give education to employees about how to budget and how best to manage their financial well-being. The third element of our mental health campaign involves face-to-face training for line managers. This training allows managers to better understand their duty of care and scope of practice when it comes to supporting colleagues with poor mental health. It equips them with the skills to have difficult conversation and gives them good knowledge of when and how to signpost appropriately. Although this course was originally designed for frontline managers, we've recently sent all of our HGV drivers through this training, which has been adopted for them. This is due to the fact there may be increased risk factors for poor mental health due to the role which involves lone working, night working, and is also a sedentary role. The next slide is just a recent example of one of our Team Talk slides. Team Talk slides are a pack of slides for line managers to communicate important messages to their team. We know from our private healthcare that 70% of our referrals for physiotherapy comes from males in our workforce and 30% from females. This is a true demographic of our workforce. However, when it comes to mental health, only 50% of the referrals come from the male population and 50% from females. This aligns with research that tells us that males are less likely to come forward to speak about mental health and less likely to access support. Therefore, some of our communications are targeted towards the male population. We have recently launched podcasts through IPRS Health, which are great for lone workers or drivers. Our most recent episode was called Stress in Men. We've also added a book called The Positive Male Mind to our bibliotherapy section. And if you're not sure on bibliotherapy, it's worth checking out on Google as a great way to support employees. Our recent mental health video was forwarded by our CEO, Peter Simpson, and primarily involved men talking about their mental health. Looking forward to the wellbeing plan next couple of years, we really want to focus on how we can create better work. How can we put the roles in Anglian Water under the microscope to see if we can decrease the demands of the role, increase the control of what employees do, how we best manage change within the organisation and improve working relationships. This, of course, has to be balanced against the business needs and demands. We also plan to increase that leadership section and have more better life champions. And these are employees who are passionate about helping others become happier, healthier and safer. We measure our success internally and externally. Internally, 98% of our employees have completed a Love to Listen survey. This is a company-wide survey which has demonstrated we're making some great progress towards mental health and wellbeing. We also have life orientation sessions. Nearly 60% of our employees have completed these orientation sessions, which is a day's training around how employees can be happier, healthier and safer within work. Externally, we're very pleased that we won the 2019 Best Places to Work from Glassdoor. We're particularly proud of this one as it was our employees that voted for this award. And in 2019, we've also won Bupa Wellbeing Award hosted by the business and the community. The last slide gives an overall of all the health and wellbeing support we offer our employees, which I'll leave up for your interest. So thanks for listening, and I hope it was of some interest.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that excellent presentation, Jonathan. So thank you to all of our speakers today. So we now do have some time for our question and answer session. It's not too late to put forward your questions. Simply use the chat box which should be on the side of your screen. But before we begin, I'd just quite like to share with you the results from today's poll. And I'd like to invite our panellist Rebecca. Rebecca posed there to comment on this if we can do. Hi Rebecca, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can, thank you.
Wonderful. So hopefully you can see it all you can all see it on your screens now. So the question was, do all employees in your organisation feel comfortable discussing their mental health with colleagues? And so you can see on the screen, 9% said yes, 36% said no, and 55% said I don't know. So Rebecca, just interested to hear what your thoughts are on this, on the results.
Well, unfortunately, this really doesn't surprise me, which is a real shame, but I think it's a really good reflection of what some of the other presenters were talking about today, about the importance of breaking down the barriers and reducing the stigma around mental health. Mental health, everyone has a mental health, just like everyone has a physical health. So it's so important for people to feel that they are empowered. And I think the slide that the presentation we've just listened to by the guys at Anglian Water really demonstrates the really positive things that are happening out there in the industry, and how it is possible. It's not easy, but it is possible. And when it's done properly, the impact can be really quite amazing. So yeah, I think Anglian Water deserve a pat on the back for everything they've been doing. But unfortunately, those numbers really don't surprise me.
So obviously Anglian Water there are a brilliant example of an organisation that's doing an awful lot to support their employees with mental health. But for a lot of organisations out there, how would you suggest making this case to senior management? Because of course that isn't reflective of all organisations, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's where the challenge lies really. And unfortunately, sometimes talking about the human cost and the social cost in terms of the mental health and the well-being of your employees doesn't always hit home with senior management, because they have so many different priorities and need to focus on. So I think one of the things that I would start with is looking at the financial cost of mental health on an organisation, and then reflect whether or not taking the steps is you can actually afford not to. When we look at the cost of mental health on UK businesses, it's really quite substantial. I think it's something like 33 billion now, if you sort of look at the most recent reports. Now, that's not a number that can be ignored. So if people don't really know where to begin, that might be quite a good place to start.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I personally found the stats in your presentation surprising. I personally feel like sometimes I am quite aware of the trends in mental health and what's going on, but those stats were incredibly surprising. So how severe do you think the underreporting of stress and anxiety is?
Quite substantial. So I think that there has been a lot of research. There's more and more research that's coming out, and a lot of people often ask about this sort of increase in poor mental health. But actually, there's two things there. There is the prevalence rates of poor mental health on an upwards trend, but the other thing is that luckily, and we're getting to a stage where people are becoming more aware and more tolerant towards themselves and acceptant of their poor mental health. So the 1 in 6 statistic comes out from a report that's done by the NHS, which is published every 7 years. And the next one should be coming out in 2021, which is our best overview as it stands of the actual prevalence rates of mental health in the UK, in England, sorry, should I say. So we'll get an indication of how things have changed, because things have changed a lot in the last few years. So hopefully we might get an idea. I think those numbers are going to increase, and I think we'll get a more accurate reflection when the next report comes out. But as it stands, I think they really are very underreported.
Thank you very much for answering those questions, Rebecca. And we're now going
problem.
to move on and speak to Jonathan, if you can hear me.
I can, hiya.
Wonderful. Hi, Jonathan. So obviously, the initiatives and the wellbeing action plan which you have at Anglian Water is absolutely incredible. What is the feedback from employees? What have your employees been saying about the programme and how it's helped them?
I think going back to what Rebecca was saying about how underreported it was, since we've been doing a lot of work with breaking the stigma, hosting these teen talk sessions and asking senior leaders to kind of tell their own stories on mental health, we've seen quite a rise in people reporting poor mental health through the sickness absence stats. So where I think in the presentation talked about our sickness absence stats on mental health and physical health are always on par, our mental health has now overtaken that, and we see that as a really positive sign, because people are, more likely, feel more comfortable to support and get that support early.
Brilliant, thank you. And it'd be great if you could elaborate a bit more on the duties of a Better Life Champion and how you envisage that unfolding next year.
Yeah, so we do offer a lot as far as through our reward schemes and private healthcare, but not everyone's always aware of what's available. So there's a lot of focus on line managers, and they often are under a lot of pressure to deliver lots of things. So to help them deliver some of the good messages and make them aware of what's available, these life champions would act like wellbeing champions, and life is our kind of terminology for wellbeing, in the sense that it's all encompassing, it's holistic, that they work towards helping the company employees be happy, healthy and safer. They would host teen talk sessions, they would promote the tools and resources available that help people sign up to things like our virtual GP or Health for You app. So just wellbeing advocates really that would help carry out that wellbeing plan that was showed on the presentation.
Great, and in your presentation you also touched upon individual wellness action plans, which are between managers and employees. And what's entailed in that action plan? What sort of questions would you ask, or particular discussion points would you run through?
Yeah, they're really simple, and they're one of the sort of cheapest, simplest things you can do for your employees. We kind of use the Mind template. So if you went to Google, type wellness action plan, the Mind website comes up, and it just gives employees and their line managers a template to have a structured conversation around mental health. So quite often with certain work environments, people don't necessarily have the skills to have those good conversations that are empathetic, uses open questions. So the template can help with that. And having done it on my own team, it's really insightful what you do learn and how will you get to know your own team. And going back to the very first presentation, once you do know that, it's easier to identify changes in either their appearance or behaviour, and then able to act. So it's just a bit of paper, a template document, but it's not part of HR policy or process. It's not a risk assessment. It's just a tool used to have a good conversation during a one-to-one, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And out of interest, because we've had a question come through from a member of the audience asking, can any of the panel recommend a mental health first aid course provider? Have you used one at all?
We didn't go along the sort of mental health first aider route, and not that there's anything wrong with them. I think that they're a really good training course for individuals to increase their awareness and give them some tools. But we found that it was quite a off-the-shelf product, and we wanted something a little bit more bespoke. So we've got a course very similar, but it's carried out by the Mental Health at Work company, and they deliver the training to frontline managers at first. And we decided to deliver it to them because research shows that they're more likely to be under stress and develop poor mental health. And then we've rolled it out to sort of areas of the business that we feel are at risk. So it's just a one-day course called Mental Health Awareness, which is similar to the mental health first aiders, but we don't have any mental health first aiders in the company.
Wonderful, thank you for that answer. And of course, in your presentation, you mentioned how there were particular key months where you saw an increase in sickness and leave. Do you believe the level of analysis you performed regarding sickness absence, do you think that is necessary for all fleets that are looking to improve employee wellbeing?
I think when it comes to wellbeing interventions, it's really important that it's targeted. There's some reasons behind why you do what you do. I think when it comes to wellbeing, sometimes some interventions are just nice to have. So having some good sort of methodology around what you do and why is really important. So yeah, seasonal affective disorder, winter months, there is going to be poorer mental health out there. January, there's going to be major financial concerns. 40% of people with poor mental health, financial well-being is one of the main driving factors. So yeah, I think everyone should look at their sickness absence data, see if there are any correlations or trends, and just what's been mentioned in the previous conversations, just getting to know your staff and find out what their potential triggers could be. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Rebecca has just mentioned that the Mental Health at Work is a great tool, and she definitely highly recommend that. So to Andy, who asked that question, then Rebecca has recommended the Mental Health at Work tool. So we can, when we email you all with a recording of the webinar, then we can include some of the key resources and websites which some of the presenters have mentioned, if that would be of help and of interest to you all. Wonderful. Well, we will wrap up there. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all of you for attending today's webinar. I found it extremely interesting, and we hope you've all found it useful and have taken away plenty of ideas for things which you can do and changes you can make in your organisations. So the recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our Global Fleet Champions website. So if you want to re-watch at any time, you can do so. And please do keep an eye on the Global Fleet Champions website as we announce upcoming 2020 events. But as you can see on the screen now, we do have a webinar on driving in adverse weather conditions, which will be taking place in late January, and registration will open for that soon. So thank you very much again for attending today. We do welcome your feedback, so please do complete our short feedback form, which will appear on your screen once the webinar ends. And if you'd like to discuss the content of today's webinar, which I'm sure there'll be lots of lively discussion, then please do join our Global Fleet Champions LinkedIn group. I'd like to say a huge thank you again to all of today's presenters. We hope you can all join us again soon, and we'll see you in the new year with our new upcoming webinars. Thank you very much.